welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you can join us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health entrepreneur and a health educator by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomenon I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, communication, and interaction gap between fitness and wellness professionals and medical professionals. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by disseminating the latest information to allow fitness and wellness professionals to lead lucrative, long, and successful careers helping people in health and fitness. And to do that in episode 42, I'm joined by Vanessa Severiano. Vanessa has a background in sales and marketing, has been in the industry for a couple of decades now. As you'll hear in the beginning part of the podcast, we actually have some common ground from the early part of our career. And I think the reason that this is such an amazing discussion is it again gets into the business side of what we do. And I've said this many times, you cannot help anyone if you're not making enough money to make a living for yourself. The bottom line is if you aren't making money doing this, you just have a hobby, you don't have a job, and you're not going to be doing this for very long. And Vanessa is going to talk about a framework for how fitness and wellness professionals can consider how to be more effective business people, from the very fundamental concepts of how we consider our perspective on sales to how we develop strategic partnerships, and then even progressing on to many of the lessons that she's learned from all the amazing guests on her podcast, which is the business side of fitness podcast. I think Vanessa is a perfect person to have this conversation around how we can level up as fitness and wellness professionals from a business perspective. Because again, if you don't have a business, you have a hobby, and you're not going to be in this taking care of people for very long. Any additional information we'd like to share from this episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 42. Please enjoy this conversation with Vanessa Severiano. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Vanessa Severiano. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me here, Michael.
I'm always excited to have conversations with other fellow podcasters because we seem to be cut from the same cloth of trying to do the same crazy thing every week, week in and week out, get guests and talk to people. So it's always nice to be on the other side of the microphone from someone that also does this.
Yeah, I definitely would say that after I think I've recorded 125 episodes, I feel pretty comfortable behind the mic, but you never know what's going to happen.
You don't. Well, before we get into our conversation today, which is going to be around your podcast and business lessons for fitness and wellness professionals, why don't you give us a little idea of your background?
Sure. So I have been in the fitness industry for about 20 years. I got started at the Crunch corporate office in New York City. After I graduated college, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I had always thought that I was going to be an attorney, but at the end of my undergrad degree, I just kind of thought, all right, I need a break. This is not going to happen. And I have 2 degrees, one in English literature and interpersonal and organizational communication. And it's like, well, what does that mean, right? What career path does that point to? And so I honestly just did not want to work in a cubicle. I wanted to work for a fun brand. So I started researching brands that seemed like they were interesting and stood for something and weren't going to be a complete drag to work for. And so that's how I ended up at Crunch. And at that time, the original owner was there, Doug Levine, and I got hired by Adam Hirsch, who has been my long-term mentor, and Roger Harvey, who's now the CEO of New York Sports Club. So that was a very work hard, play hard environment. And that's really where I got dip my toes in the fitness pond. And then one thing led to another. And now 20 years later, I've worked for a variety of brands, Equinox, Flywheel, David Barton Gym, a handful of startups. And now I consult with fitness and wellness brands on growth strategy. And then I'm the host of the Business Side of Fitness podcast. And there we are.
Awesome. Which, based upon the background you just gave us, you're eminently qualified for it. It's interesting you bring up Crunch, at least Crunch circa early 2000s, different than Crunch of today. If I'm not mistaken, that was boxing ring in the middle of facility Crunch, right?
You nailed it. In fact, I have a friend that got married inside of the boxing ring at the Atlanta club, and we had drag queens teaching classes. I mean, Crunch was such a cool, fun brand. It's still a great brand. It's evolved quite a bit. But at that time, when I had first started, Doug Levine was in the process of selling the company to Bally Total Fitness. And so that kind of, the brand shifted a bit as becoming a part of a huge entity as opposed to being, privately owned. And so that was just, oh my God, such a great experience. So much fun. And definitely learned a lot of lessons and made a lot of mistakes during that time as well.
Yeah. And to bring it full circle, I was actually working for Bally Total Fitness at the time they acquired Crunch in the Detroit Toledo market. And so I learned a lot of the Crunch personal training system at the time. So yeah, our little ecosystem is not that big, it turns out.
That's so funny. Yeah, I always say the fitness world is like small and incestuous, and you never want to burn a bridge because you never know when you're going to come across somebody that you've worked with or that has worked with a colleague or that knows your name. And so that's always been kind of how I conduct myself in business. You just never know. And it's so funny how many people from the past, from back in the day at Crunch, that I have then subsequently worked with at other companies, and how many people I still keep in touch with just from those early days that I'm still very close friends with. Like, one of my best friends was the creative, the VP of marketing and creative director at Crunch, still 20 years later.
Yeah, well, and that's probably our first business lesson of this episode is that, never burn a bridge and always maintain those strong relationships, because they come back around in every industry, but I feel like ours in particular. Talk a little bit about your podcast. We were talking before you came on the air. I think at some point in time, all would-be podcasters have this vision of what they want to create. What was really the driving force behind it? What has it evolved into 100+ episodes in? And what's your goals for your podcast?
Well, my goal for the podcast is definitely to bring value to the listeners. This all got started was I was working in Miami Beach, and I live in South Miami, and I was spending 2 to 3 hours a day in a car in a commute. And I said, something has to switch here, because I was experiencing road rage. I'm just being honest. This is real and raw here. I was really feeling frustrated with the commute. And I said, let's turn this negative into a positive. And I started just using that time to listen to podcasts. And I started listening to Guy Raz, How I Built This, on NPR. And I loved that podcast. It made me actually look forward to getting into the car and hearing the stories of all these founders that had built these amazing brands. And so that's kind of planted the seed in my mind of, what if there was something like this that was just geared towards fitness and wellness brands? Since, hello, that's our industry. That's something that really appealed to me. And so I had that idea in my mind. I had actually spoken to 2 friends about doing a podcast together. We never took action on it. And then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, it's now or never. I had a friend and mentor, Eric Malzone, who's also a podcaster. He hosts the Future of Fitness podcast. And he told me, Vanessa, like, you should do this. You would really enjoy the podcasting world, because I am just so curious by nature. I love talking to other people, love learning. I'm a lifelong learner, and on the podcast, I'm learning along with the listeners, right? I'm hearing people's stories, picking their brain, understanding, what makes them successful, what makes the brand successful, understanding their thoughts on leadership. And so that's kind of how the podcast started and how it's evolved. I mean, it's just been so many great conversations. I feel more comfortable for sure when I first started podcasting. I have always been, my background is in sales and marketing. I feel very comfortable talking to people, but I've always been behind the scenes. I'm not one of those people that's constantly like on Instagram stories telling my whole life story about like, this is what I wore today. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I ate today. So I was always behind the scenes directing video shoots and photo shoots and whatnot, but never front and center myself. So I felt very nervous and uncomfortable on the mic. My first couple of episodes, my first episode, Eddie Talk from Rex Roundtables was nice enough to come on and be my first guest and take a gamble on me. I was so nervous. I think I probably stuttered. I probably said the word like a million times, but we know right through experience that the only way to master something is to just power through, right? You have to get reps in. And I knew that episode 1 is going to look very different from episode 100. And the only way to get there is to just do the damn thing. And so that's what I did.
I love it. Well, and that's probably lesson 2 from this podcast, which is, that's this confidence paradox that people think about sometimes. Like, I can't do that until I get confident doing it. But the only way you're going to get confident doing it is to actually do it. And if there's any group of people that understand the importance of doing reps to get better, it's probably the people that are listening to this podcast. I love it. And I love it as a business podcast because I've been in the industry now for 23 years. And what I've seen time and time again is so many incredibly talented and passionate fitness and wellness professionals who want to help people so bad. They can't figure out a way to sustain an income in this industry. And as a result, many great people leave our industry, and to the detriment of not only our industry, but to public health. So I think it not only is a very admirable vision that you have, but I think it's also very, very necessary. What's been your experience on looking at the fitness and wellness ecosystem and how the frontline professional views the business side of fitness?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. I just know so many amazing, talented, special people that literally give their all, that wake up at 3 a.m. to be at the gym early to service clients that are there until close, that go home and grab a quick cat nap or that take a cat nap in the break room. I mean, I've seen it all. And I just have so much respect and admiration for, those frontline workers and people that are out there, like we talked about doing the thing, right? That really are, setting the foundation for our industry. One thing that I have seen that's kind of like a common thread here is the money mindset. I think that a lot of people in the fitness industry feel like, hey, I'm here to help people. And so they equate helping people with struggling. Like, it's wrong to take money from somebody. It's wrong to ask somebody for money because I really just want to help them get better, or I want to help them lose this weight or help them overcome this injury. And so, it's not right to ask them for money, or they, that kind of gets uncomfortable, right? That's not their zone of genius, right? Their zone of genius is working with the person and helping them fix whatever problem they have. So I think one thing that I love doing is helping fitness and wellness professionals overcome that mental hurdle, because that's what it is. It's a mental hurdle. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can help people, bring them tremendous value, and be financially rewarded and be successful and not struggle. You can have it all, baby.
Yeah. And I want to follow up on that in a moment, but I'll extend your concept a step further to say, not only does it not have to be either or, it can't be either or, because if you're going to be in this industry to help people for any significant period of time, you have to make a living. Like, bottom line, if you're not making money, you don't have a business, you just have a hobby. How do fitness and wellness professionals start to get over that mental block? It's hard, but I mean, you said this is something you talked about. I'm curious how you advise the person that says, "Oh, I'm really uncomfortable doing that," or "It just doesn't feel right." What's your conversations with that kind of person?
Well, I think it all starts with a mindset shift, right? So many trainers that I've worked with, it's like, let's start with money is an exchange of value. When somebody gives you money, you're going to take that same money and give it to some other business and spend it. It's not like you're hoarding all of this money. Money just flows. It flows from one person to another, one business to another. And so you're just like the temporary holder of that money. So you're bringing tremendous value to somebody. We all know it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. I saw Jesse Itzler posted this on LinkedIn around Thanksgiving, and I just was like, yes, you're talking my language. It doesn't matter if you have a private jet, all the money in the world, a great business, you're going on vacation, and you wake up and you don't feel right. You don't feel good in your own skin. The only thing you care about is feeling better, right? And so that's what we do. That's what our industry does. It helps people live healthier, better quality lives. And so you deserve to be compensated for that, right? There's a tremendous value in that. And so just having that mindset shift of money's not dirty, sales is not dirty. Like, I think sometimes people get so caught up in like overcoming objections and like memorizing some script, or like even, I've worked with trainers that are like, oh, I have to memorize all the package prices. It's like, no, you need to connect with the person and have like lead with sincerity, right? Lead with a genuine, you have a problem and I have a solution. I'm going to help connect that problem with the solution that I offer. It all starts there. It's so simple. People overcomplicate it, and they just need to kind of get out of their own heads to be able to move forward. And like you said, create a sustainable business.
Yeah, I love it. Do you think our industry has done that to itself in terms of making sales a dirty word? Because I work for Bally Total Fitness, and I can now say this because Bally Total Fitness is no longer in existence, that they Fitness USA, like, yeah, to what extent do you think our industry has contributed to sales being something that people shy away from?
Well, I definitely think there was like a reputation, but there was like a method to that. And I mean, listen, that was like a high volume game and like low price, right? Like, I remember those contracts. Dude, those were like giant long contracts that had like 10 layers to it. It was like that carbon copy contract that people were signing. And it was like lifelong membership for $10 a month, right? We're not, especially like personal trainers, healthcare practitioners, physical therapists, we're not selling that style anymore, right? We need to lead with value. I do think that, yes, there was a time and a place, and some businesses have done that. And I think some businesses still do. But if you really want to make it in this business, you really have to lead with value, not some weird sales tactics that you're pressuring people into. You're just there to solve their problem.
Yeah, so well put. I do think that that's a notion that we need to kind of disabuse people of. I think there are especially a lot of medical professionals that we might want to collaborate with as an industry. I still think they remember the industry as being that. I often joke, I feel like there's a bunch of people walking around that still think they have Bally memberships that they're paying some way, somehow. And so I do think that that's an important awareness for professionals to have, is that is on some level the reputation of our industry in some people's minds.
I suppose it could be, but really we can turn that around. And I think we just need to look at that obstacle as an opportunity and not say like, oh, that's an excuse of why I can't be successful. Because that's really what it is. That would be like an excuse that we accept as like reasons why we're not moving forward, and excuses are just need to go in the trash, right? I think we need to foster this idea, like fitness and medical. There's such a huge opportunity to come together to really foster collaboration over competition. We need to get away from a lack mindset of like, I'm a healthcare, I'm a fitness, practitioner. I'm a personal trainer. And if I send my person to a physical therapist, they're never going to come back to me. Or I'm a physical therapist. When I'm done healing somebody from an injury and they go to the gym, I'm never going to see them again, right? We have to look at it as the continuum of care. What is best for the patient or the client in the long run. There's a ton of ways to make money in this world and be successful. And there's endless amounts of opportunity. And, we just need to look at it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset. I want to start to get tactical in this conversation. I think that preamble was great and fun and some important foundational context for the bulk of our discussion, which is how fitness and wellness professionals can use some of the lessons that you have learned over your extensive career. And so that's kind of where I want to go next is we're sitting here. I really wish I could be telling you that we're out of the pandemic, but we're clearly not. So we're still sitting here in this pandemic. It's kind of devastated our industry, as many industries, but yet we're figuring out a way to survive and in some cases thrive. What are you seeing? What lessons are you seeing and learning from fitness businesses and fitness professionals from a marketing or a brand building perspective that are working right now that our audience might be able to apply?
I think simplicity sells. When we overcomplicate things for people, people get caught up in analysis paralysis and they don't move forward. Like if I told you, hey, you have this injury and I'm going to take you through a 3-step process to get to the other side of this injury. Or if I told you this is a 20-step process, here's what we're going to do on day 1, then day 2, right? Like that seems very complicated, right? The 3-step process might take a lot of time in between the 3 steps, but I need to simplify what I'm doing, right? I think sometimes also something that I see a lot of fitness professionals and healthcare professionals do is use this like very complicated jargon and like all these words to like kind of show their knowledge, right? So if I'm like talking about the body and I'm like, oh, I don't even know what, because like this is like out of my wheelhouse. But like I've heard somebody say like, oh, and your patella is tracking this way and whatever. And the average person doesn't know that. And the average person doesn't want to feel inferior or dumb. Like you don't need to prove that you are, valuable or worth your knowledge by using really complicated big words that confuse people. I think it's really getting simple. I think it's really about leading with value, like painting that picture for people, helping them, celebrating small victories. I think so many people are intimidated of health, by health and fitness, because I think we've complicated it so much and made people think like, okay, I need to be tracking my sleep, tracking my macros, tracking my steps, tracking my heart rate variability. I need to go to the gym and do HIIT workouts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then Thursday I need to do this, right? Like, no, get it, like simplify all of that. I think that's like the most important takeaway right now.
I think that's such an important lesson because so many people try to overemphasize the value that they provide and they just confuse people to a great extent. And part of my background is coaching psychology. And I know in terms of making a connection with a client or a patient, as soon as you start to make them feel inferior from a knowledge perspective, there's going to be a lot of disconnect in that relationship. And I'm very happy that you've talked about the simplicity aspect because we need more of that right now in our industry.
Right. And I think it's about like finding that connection. Right now, there's so many like digital fitness offerings out there, right? There's all this tech and whatnot. What can you as a person provide? What value can you provide somebody or a potential client that no app can compete with, that no piece of tech can compete with? It's like, hey, Michael, I'm going to be with you every step of the way. I know that you've been dealing with this nagging injury for the last like 5 years, and it's really eaten away at the quality of your life. Like, I know how to fix this. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to keep you motivated. I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to check in on you. Like, you're in this. I'm in this with you. You're not alone. Like, that is what people need. People need connection. They're willing to pay for connection personalization, and accountability. If you deliver those things, you're good to go.
Yeah. And that first piece, connection, is very hard to, if not impossible, at least at this point, to outsource to AI or a bot or an app. Like, connection seems to be the scarcest commodity on the planet right now, to be honest.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go to the gym every day just to be around people, right? I think, and if somebody's listening to this and they're like, connection, yeah, that sounds great, but like, where do I even start? It's like, find that common ground with the person, right? Like, immediately, like, I'm just a curious person. And so this just happens naturally, but I start asking people, where are you from? Like, what is it that you have in common with the person, right? You and I had in common that we were at Crunch and Valley Total Fitness when their company was going through a transition, right? We're both podcasters. You find that common ground. Is it like, you're from New York? Oh, so am I. We have that in common. Like, what is it that brings you together with this person? And sometimes for trainers or fitness professionals, it can be hard to find a common ground with somebody that you're like, well, that person's the CEO of a company. Trust me, you have something in common. Even if it's you both love strawberries, like, find that common ground and go from there, because that's how you disarm people, right? You connect with them. And that's how, like, and believe it or not, that's sales, my friends. That's the sales process, right? Developing rapport. And when we think of sales, we think of some, like, step-by-step process of like bait and switch. And it starts with connection and rapport.
I'd like to take a quick break from today's episode to tell you a little something about one of our sponsors. As all of you are well aware, addressing the wellness paradox is a lifelong passion project for me. And when you're going to go on a long journey, it's difficult to go it alone. You need to find like-minded individuals that are willing to go on that crusade with you. And that's exactly what I found at the MRF Institute. The team over at the MRF Institute creates educational content for fitness and wellness professionals who are serious about becoming a part of our healthcare continuum. Getting on the healthcare continuum is all about leveling up our skills to be looked at as that valued resource provider. The wellness paradox is certainly an avenue for you to do that, but we need many different levers to pull if we're going to get there. And the MRF Institute is definitely one of those levers. You can go to their website, mrfinstitute.org, to find all kinds of great, informative, free informational content. And if you choose to engage with any of their paid content, they've created a coupon code specifically for Wellness Paradox listeners. You can enter in WP 2022, that's WP, and then the number 2022 to the website at checkout to receive a 15% discount on your purchase. I highly recommend you go check out mrfinstitute.org. Now back to today's episode. Yeah, I love it. I also love that you're coming at this from a marketing perspective. That's your background. Again, my background is part coaching psychology, and you talk about this trusted, connected relationship. And my mind immediately goes to the concept of therapeutic alliance and things that we've seen in the literature bear itself out in terms of improving outcomes. We're both talking about this from different perspectives, and I think that's super cool.
And that's something that we always need to remember. Everybody comes to the same situation with a different lens, right? Based on their experiences, their unique, learnings, their relationships, their, whatever, their past jobs, right? So we have to always like understand where somebody's coming from. And sometimes I think we'll look at one situation so differently from another, but fail to see the other person's perspective. And so, I heard this saying before, and this is something that I try to embody. It's like, seek to understand that other person's perspective of the situation.
Yeah, I love it. One very fruitful area right now for, I think, all industries, but particularly our industry, and it's been part of the thesis behind my podcast, is the idea of collaborations and strategic partnerships. I'm curious to get your thoughts on these and have you teach on this for a little bit for our audience. Why are these so important to develop? And then how can we consider how to approach some of these strategic partnerships, not from like a macro organizational level like Equinox would, but for the solo practitioner or a wellness coach that sees the value in developing partnerships?
Well, I think that, first we have to think like, lead generation is like the foundation of every business, right? And it's all a numbers game. You need a certain amount of leads to get, right, enough, like, I don't know, complimentary PT sessions to get a certain amount that are sold, right? It's all a numbers game. So we have to constantly be thinking of ways to get in front of people, right? And those are leads. And a strategic partnership is just like, looking to get leads from another business. And that could be another solopreneur, right? So say I'm a trainer, a strategic partnership is just, first of all, I'm thinking of my ideal client, right? So say I'm a trainer and I really specialize in youth sports, right? Okay. And that's a big thing also, like, the riches are in the niches. Don't try to be everything to everybody. Like, it's okay to niche down. I think people fail to do that and just try to say like, oh, I can help everybody. Like, first of all, who do you love to help? It's like helping this person brings you energy. It doesn't drag your energy. And everybody that's been in the fitness industry that's dealt with multiple clients knows some people are just energy vampires for you. They could be perfect for somebody else, right? But because that's not like what you thrive in, right? So say I love coaching, youth sports. So now I'm going to think like, okay, where are these youth sports potential clients already doing business, right? Where are their parents doing business? What type of business are they doing for their kids, right? So they're investing money. Everybody has money. It's just people assign value to certain things, right? So for example, so that person like might not spend much money on themselves, but they spend a ton of money on their kids, right? I think any parent listening to this is like, yep. Yeah. So youth sports. Okay. What are like some youth sports doctors in the area that you could potentially partner with that after a kid has seen them and they're, coming off of an injury that you can help them safely transition, return to sport, right? Okay. What are the local businesses in my area, in my community that sell youth sports equipment, right? What are some places that sell healthy food where youth athletes frequent after practice, right? Like thinking about those things, like, okay, who is my ideal client? What businesses are they already doing business with? And then approaching those businesses and creating an allegiance because you're non-competing and you have the same client, because then in return, you're going to support their business. And I think the first thing is just thinking about where is that person, then thinking about the value you could bring to another business. So always lead with the value that you can provide that other business. Never like, hey, I was wondering if you could just give me all your clients and a list of name and numbers, right? Nobody's going to be into that, but everybody's interested in low cost lead generation. And so if you lead with the value you can provide that other business, I think you have a very good chance of moving forward.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a common thread through this conversation is the concept of, leading with value. It doesn't matter if you're establishing a strategic partnership with another business or you're talking to a prospective client or patient. It's always leading with the value you can provide, not what you want to get out of the process.
The money always comes after. Like the money, like it's like, do you ever look at some companies and it's like, they built something really special. They started with like a core, a culture, a soul, right? And then they grew because that's attractive, right? People are attracted to that as opposed to people that are just like thinking about the money first and not thinking about the value they're providing and the end user. I think that's something that we all have to think about. Like, how can I bring this other person value?
Yeah, that's the really elemental foundation of this. The cool thing about you and your podcast is, and this is also I'm so blessed for this as well. I get to talk to a bunch of amazing people. That's like the biggest secret. Like, I don't want to get out about like doing a podcast. Like, I do this for my audience to put this great content out in the world, but also I do it for me because I get so much out of these episodes. I learn so much. What are some of the most valuable business lessons you've learned from the 100+ episodes that you've recorded? And I realize there's probably a bunch of them, but if you can distill it down into one or two really critical messages for the audience, I think that would be very useful.
Wow, there's just so many. Okay. One, I think Ryan Chapman from Life Fitness, we chatted about corporate wellness, and that just like blew my mind, because corporate wellness is just such a huge opportunity for us in the fitness industry right now. And he was talking about creating corporate wellness offerings that reward frequency, where everybody has skin in the game. And we've always talked about corporate wellness just being like a bulk discount, like, hey, I have 10,000 employees, and so I want 30% off membership fees, right? So that's one. I think, let me think, who else? Oh, Michael Abramson from Exponential just really talked about servant leadership and being a lifelong learner. And I think that's so valuable. I think, I was just talking with somebody earlier about how, like, when you first start off in business and you're like young, you're just thinking about, how can I rise up in the ranks? How can I, go from being assistant manager to being GM and then being vice president, all of this stuff. And you're just like, me. And the longer you go along, you realize like it's all about relationships and creating connections. And how can, like, my team doesn't work for me. I actually work for my team. It's my job to set them up with all the tools for success, not their job for me to, to hit my goals. Right. So I think those are really big ones. And then lastly, Ian Mullane from Keep Me, just talking about, being so obsessed with the customer journey. It's like, what does this customer, not just building something to build it, but really building it to give somebody a really great experience.
Those are all very specific and granular things. I love the topic of servant leadership. It's how I've always believed in leading my organization. Every great leader I know believes if they take care of their team will take care of their customers. And I actually don't believe as a leader that the customer comes first. I think my team comes first. And if I put my team first, then that will end up taking care of the customers. I'm very happy that you mentioned that.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, look, we're looking at the Great Resignation right now, right? It's because people haven't taken care of their teams, right? They have. And if you think of this, if you've ever been a hiring manager, if somebody's listening to this, like, it's way easier to find a new customer or client than it is to find a new employee, right? You have to invest so much in the interviewing process, going through the resumes, training somebody, it's a lot easier to onboard a new client. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the Great Resignation, and I've always believed this often said statement: people don't quit their job, they quit their boss.
Yeah. And I think it's like looking at the people on your team as humans and leading with your humanity first. And, it's okay if somebody makes a mistake, like not making them feel so scared to make a mistake, because then they don't make decisions, right? And then you're caught making all the decisions. And I think just, allowing people some grace, just like we've all been afforded some grace in our professional and personal lives at some point. And so providing somebody with grace in life and realizing that, especially now in these weird times, right? Everybody's dealing with something, and there's a lot happening behind the scenes that we don't know. And so, right, without people, businesses can't succeed. People are businesses. So we have to keep that in mind. It's like, actually, we do need our teams to survive.
Yeah. And all of that is very exciting and very empowering. And that's where I want to shift our conversation for a brief moment. We're sitting here in a very, very challenging time for our industry. And sadly, I think that challenges are only going to increase, particularly as this Omicron variant seems to be way more severe than anyone thought. But yet, I think there's a lot of cause for hope for the future. what do you see in our industry that gives you hope for where we're going?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for what's out there. I mean, Michael, I don't know about you, but when I first got into this industry, people are like, when are you going to get a real job? Like you went to college and you're working for a fitness company. Like, are you kidding me? Like, do you just wear leggings all day? Like, it was kind of like, no, like I love this thing that I'm doing. Like, I don't even know how I got into this, right? But I love this thing. And now I think, the fitness industry has been seeing exponential growth leading up to the pandemic, right? But I think now even more so people know that your health and fitness, right? Like your health over time impacts your reaction to COVID and any other of these, comorbidities, right? Like you need to take care of yourself and invest in your health and fitness. And I think more people are aware of that than ever before. And so if, there's this industry stat that keeps floating around that like 20% of people are members of fitness clubs and, what about the other 80%? So to me, that excites me. Like we have this opportunity right now to get to those other 80%. If we want to do that and help these people, guess what? We need to change our messages. We can't keep peddling, get shredded for summer, flat abs. Not everybody wants that. That's been the old way of doing things, right? We have to, if we want to touch these new people, we have to think of new ways of reaching them and servicing them. And so there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity to really impact the lives of others, help all these crazy things that we have going on in this country, especially is like diabetes, heart disease. We know that there's a huge correlation between, daily exercise, consistent positive habits, and reducing the likelihood of suffering from these diseases. And so there's a tremendous amount of opportunity and people stepping up to the plate that are doing things by leading with value, that are doing things that, celebrate small victories and encourage people as opposed to intimidating them. Those are the people that are going to get ahead in this world.
I am so happy you mentioned the messaging, the language, the narratives that have existed in our industry for decades. If the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, to a great extent, we've done that as an industry. We've talked about the 20 percenters versus the 80 percenters for as long as I can remember, but we've not till recently started to change the messaging. And I am completely aligned with you on we need messaging that's more approachable. We need messaging that's more inclusive. We need messaging that isn't about getting the six pack, but it's just about living a more fulfilled life.
Right. And don't assume that everybody wants weight loss, right? Some people, like, there are so many other factors here. Some people just want to be able to play soccer in their backyard with their kids without coming out of, falling out of breath. Some people are like, hey, I went and got my blood work done and my triglycerides are high. Like, what the heck? That could lead to heart problems in the future. I just don't want to have a heart attack. It's not that they want to look sexy in a bikini. And so I feel like so many people make these assumptions about other people's goals that might not be the case. It's like, talk to people, connect with them, find out why they're there, what they want, how you can help, right? And it's like, some people and fitness looks different for everybody, right? Some people love getting, I personally love just like pushing the limit. Like, I need to get like smashed to feel good, but I want to protect my knees and back. So I want to feel like I'm doing something good. But then, like, my brother is like, I just want to move. Like, I don't want to feel totally uncomfortable and sweaty and red face, right? Like, everybody, my husband loves swimming in a pool because he's like, I'm sick of going to the gym and like, it's getting boring for me. So I need to switch it up, but that's still fitness. And so we need to realize that we need to, change our messaging to resonate with more people and get more people, it's all about touching more lives, helping more people.
Yeah. Such an important perspective. Vanessa, where can people go if they want to find out more about you and your podcast and all the great things you're doing?
My podcast is the business side of fitness. So people can subscribe to it wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on every platform. My website, vanessaseveriano.com, which Michael's going to have to definitely put in the show notes because nobody's going to know how to spell that. And
we'll get it there. Don't worry.
I'm always on LinkedIn. That's definitely my chosen platform to be on as far as social media. And then I'm also on Instagram, but there's a lot of pictures of my kids. So just consider yourself warned.
Fair enough. And we'll link up to all those in the show notes page so you have a chance to connect. And certainly I think this conversation is just a small part of a much larger dialogue that you have on your podcast. And I've listened to it. I found it very, very valuable. We connected heard you at a conference, and I found your insight very valuable there as well. And I think this is something that our listeners really can take to heart, because if you can't make a living doing this, you're not helping anyone. That's going to bring me to our last question. And it's the entire thesis behind my podcast, which is the wellness paradox, is the fact that fitness and wellness professionals that have this profound ability to help improve population health don't seem to have a trusted, interactive, and communicative relationship with medical and other allied health professionals. From your vast experience in the industry and everyone you've talked to, if you could distill down into one piece of advice to give fitness and wellness professionals to close off that gap, what would that piece of advice be?
Relationship building. It just starts with relationships. And that could be like me, like I was talking about with that earlier example of saying, hey, I love working with youth sports, reaching out to pediatric orthopedists that deal with youth sports, right? Like niching down and establishing those relationships and connections, and just start small. I think it can be like so overwhelming when you think of the big problem, and it's not up to each of us individually to solve that big problem. Just start by connecting and building those relationships with people that are in the medical world, and, by leading by, the value that you can provide them and their patients, and just putting that patient first. And, how can you help those people? And that's what it's all about.
Relationship building. Vanessa Severiano, thank you so much for being on the Wellness Paradox.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. And thanks for pronouncing my last name correctly. That's really impressive.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Vanessa as much as I did. If you found it insightful and informative, please share with your friends and colleagues. Those shares make a big difference for us. Any information we'd like to share with you from this episode can be found on the show notes page. That's by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 42. Please be on the lookout for next week's episode when it drops on Wednesday. And if you have a moment, please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast platforms. Those reviews are so critical to helping us grow the podcast. Until we chat again next week, please be well.